Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about two spiritual or deity figures, Kokopelli and Xochipilli. These names sound familiar and they have a lot in common. I think they are very interconnected and feed off each other, and there's people who adamantly say otherwise. But I'm going to explain who these two beings are and also explain why I think they are closely related. Now, if you're new to my channel, one of my passions is studying the archaeology and the history of the American Southwest and the Mexican Northwest, as well as especially the trade that happened between as far south as northern South America, Central America, Mexico, and as far north as even here where I live in northern Utah. The trade of what? Everything. The trade of goods, from cacao beans to shells, to copper bells, to live macaws, to macaw feathers, but also the sharing and trading of ideas. So normally what happens when peoples come together and they're new to each other, or then at first there's resentment and hatred, and then there's kind of acceptance, and one of the first things that people start to adopt is clothing ideas, new fashion ideas, and new food ideas. It's one of the first things. And then eventually religious and philosophical ideas start to spread and share together. We know that there was, unfortunately, the way history is taught, people just kind of think these people lived here, and these people lived here, and these people lived here. In truth, people moved, they traveled, there were huge shifting things. There was a volcano that went off in Arizona that shifted people out of the area, and then people came back in and new people kind of did their thing. There were droughts. There was 50 and 70 year droughts that flushed people out of areas, and then new people came in and new people would interact. There were people that came up after upheaval in Mexico that came up to the Southwest, what's now the United States. People doing this, you're sharing ideas, you're sharing genetics, you're interbreeding and making new peoples, and you're making new ideas. And so ideas shift and change. So it's a little frustrating sometimes when historians today or people say this is how it is, because this is how it is now, therefore this is how it always is. Oh, this is how this tribe believes. Well, that's how they always believe. This is how people in Mexico believe now. This is what they always believe. This is how people in the Southwest. No, things change, people change. And it's not just this leads to this leads to this. Ideas change and evolve, and some ideas flourish and then die, and then new things branch off and fill that place. Just like on a tree, branches of a tree, they're going off, and if one branch falls off, these branches over here are going to fill in that spot to get more sunlight. So there's not just a steady flow. So again, I'm sharing important background and important ideas that I think are vital to understanding the Southwest United States, Northwest Mexico region. However, I understand that this is not all cut and dry, and I understand that many tribes will have conflicting histories and conflicting ideas. So I'm going to share a lot of those, and so I'm going to start. So Kokopelli and Xochipilli. Who are these? Kokopelli is a being depicted in the Southwest, basically of United States. Xochipilli is generally attributed to being an Aztec figure. Now, I've got to start off with saying I have Dene, friend Navajo, Dene, and he says Kokopelli, which is the first being I'm going to talk about, is not to be considered a deity. This is a person, maybe with, trickster powers and stuff, but this is not a god. So something to think on and consider when we're talking about these figures, because we say, these were gods. We use these terms too fast and loose. So first of all, let's talk about Kokopelli. Now, Kokopelli today is all over the American Southwest in art, modern art. It has really taken off as a modern, iconic figure. In Moab, Utah, where I frequent a lot, it's a beautiful place. Unfortunately, it's been over-discovered by people, and it's on all the buildings, it's on all the art, all the t-shirts. Everybody has a modern version of Kokopelli, and he's depicted as having, kind of these big old crest, these plumes on his head, and he's hunched over and he's playing a flute. And people love that image. I love that image. People love it. and it's taken off more than we actually see in the historic record. So how important was this figure anciently? We're not sure, but you can find Kokopelli far more in the modern world than you can in the ancient petroglyphs. But who was he? Well, Kokopelli is a fertility deity, and again, I'm using the term deity loosely. He's usually depicted anciently as humpbacked, not just hunched over, but with a big old humpback, and he's depicted as a flute player. Now, he's often depicted with feathers or antenna protruding from his head. That's important to remember. Feathers, when we see him depicted, are very long plumes, typically red if it's ever painted, red like a scarlet macaw. Now, we know scarlet macaws were traded up from Mexico to the southwestern tribes of the United States, and I'll get to that more in a minute. But so just remember that big old plumes. Also, antenna, what are we talking about? Are we talking about little aliens? No. What has antenna? Butterflies. So remember, hang on to this association because we're going to get into it in just a second. Red plumes of a scarlet macaw or antenna of a butterfly. So keep that in your head. Kokopelli is venerated by some Native American cultures in the southwest United States. Like most fertility deities, Kokopelli presides over both childbirth and agriculture. He is generally taught to be a trickster god, and so kind of having a mischievous side to him, and he represents also the spirit of music. And among the Hopi, Kokopelli carries unborn children on his back, and he distributes them to women. Now, if you think about that, that's kind of like the stork, the old myth of the stork, bringing babies to people, which that comes from Old World in Europe. Storks will nest on top of houses, and they will perch and roost on top of houses. They'll build a big old nest, usually on chimneys in the olden days. And when they would do that, the idea is like, oh, there's a stork on your house. What's it doing? It's delivering a baby. Ooh, it's just an old myth that came about. But I remember watching Dumbo. It was the first time when I'd see, the stork delivering baby. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So people didn't want to talk about where babies came from. So it's like, well, they're delivered by the stork. And it's the same thing. It seems like Kokopelli, he's got unborn babies in his, and then you're going to be pregnant. So for this reason, young girls often feared Kokopelli. It's like, no, don't want Kokopelli around because if he might deliver a baby and I'll be pregnant all of a sudden. He often takes part in rituals relating to marriage. So if you're having a marital ritual or a marital ceremony, there was an association with Kokopelli in that way. So Kokopelli also presides over the reproduction of game animals. And for this reason, he is often depicted with animal companions such as rams and deer, which for most southwestern tribes, if you're talking about big game, these are the most common big game that are capable of being taken. There's bigger animals. You could go out on the plains and go after buffalo. You could go after elk. And there's smaller prey that was eaten. But again, that's a big meal. You get a hide, you get antlers, you get, for both of these, you get horns. So this is a lot of meat. And having the very presence of deer and bighorn sheep indicates a healthy ecosystem. So again, this idea of fertility, we want our animals to be fertile too because we want them around and we want to also be able to eat them. Now, there's also a solar association with Kokopelli. He's associated with sunbathing animals such as snakes, lizards, and also water-loving animals such as insects. And it's interesting to think because, hold on to that, remember, we're talking plumes on the head of specifically big old huge scarlet macaw primary tail feathers or butterfly antennas. And we also have an association with the sun and animals that absorb the sun and need the sun. So in his domain, he had dominion over agriculture. Kokopelli's flute playing was said that it would chase away winter and it would bring about spring. We don't think about that too much. You might get a little bit of gloominess in the winter, but we have modern heaters and heated cars and stuff. You think about winter, there's no new plants growing, and there's no grocery store to get food from. Whatever you've grown or harvested is there. And when you run out, you run out. So bringing spring and bringing summer was a good thing. You wanted the warm temperatures to come. And so the sun was very important and represented the good times. And so his flute playing was said to bring about the sun. Many tribes, such as the Zuni, also associated Kokopelli with the rain. In the southwestern United States, it is desolate. And when those monsoon rains come, we need the water, we need it for our crops, we need the grass for the animals to eat. So rain was very important. So also there's a strong association with the Zuni and other tribes as well, with the flute playing being the bringing of rain. And Kokopelli has been revered at least since the time of the Hohokam, the Yuman, and the ancestral Puebloan peoples, at least since then. The first known images of him appear to be on Hohokam pottery dating to sometime between 750 and 850 AD, which is pretty far back. Undoubtedly, this idea goes back further, but that's the earliest we can date it. But ideas don't just come out of nowhere. They ferment and they germinate within humanity and within a culture, and they develop and they adapt. And if one person will take an idea and make it big, it can be there the whole time, and then one person or a few people can make it explode. One of the prime examples in ancient Egypt, there is a deity figure called Aten. The Aten disk is a version of the sun. And the Aten disk was always present. You know, there's other gods that were far more important. Well, Tutankhamun's father, Akhenaten, who was born Akhenamun, his mom, we know, had a very big obsession with the Aten disk. And when he became pharaoh, he said, this is the God. You can worship other gods, but the other gods don't exist. There's one God for the whole world, and it's the Aten disk. And suddenly he shifted society. So one person can change that quite quickly. Now, what about the origin? Kokopelli may have been originally a representation of Aztec traders. These were known as Pochtecas. Now, Pochtecas, they traveled up from Mesoamerica, and these traders would have a big sack over their back with trade goods. Because remember, you have to haul water, you have to haul food, but you also have your trade goods that you are trading for. So these traders brought these goods slung up over their back, and that sack evolved into Kokopelli's familiar hump. Some tribes consider Kokopelli to have been a trader, the representative of the trader. These men may have used flutes to announce themselves as friendly when they're approaching a settlement. So you've got a bag over, and you're coming to the settlement, you start playing your flute, and you're playing that, and people know, oh, hey, he's friendly, he's coming, he's got trade goods. This would have been a big, huge thing. Now, some people shoot this down. Some people shoot this down and say, well, no, because we have evidence of Kokopelli before the Aztecs. So it couldn't have been an Aztec trader. But we know trade was going on for much further, much deeper times. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but cacao beans made it to northern Utah before Chaco Canyon, before the Chaco explosion. We've had cacao beans. We've tested in the museum, the Hutchings Museum where I work, we've tested theobromine has been found in some of the pots we have that vastly predate, that were even like the Fremont people were getting cacao beans up. So any trade goods coming from the South is where it was happening, man. You go to, Central America, Mexico, it's like, this is where this is a happening place. Anything coming up from there is going to be exciting. It might be as exciting as a live macaw. But hey, even macaw feathers is strung up on a sash. That's really exciting. Hey, maybe some cacao beans, or maybe some new form of pepper that's been selectively bred. You can grow some peppers. Wow, it's going to make your food so much better. So any trader, even if it wasn't these Pochtecas that were from the Aztec, you had traders coming up before. The idea of the trader coming, who does that sound like? It sounds like Santa Claus. I'll be honest. Ho, 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 Merry Christmas, Santa Claus. I've got a sack of gifts, and I'm coming in bright colors, bright colors instead of bright red. Oh, I've got bright red feathers on my head, and I'm coming in, I'm playing a flute. Oh, it's kind of like Santa Claus showing up with jingle bells. Jingle, jingle, jingle. Santa's coming. Kokopelli's coming. It's the same idea, the same excitement, like, yay, new stuff, fancy stuff's coming here. Everybody run out and come. So that makes a great deal of sense. And even though people kind of shoot down this idea, I think that it does make sense that the original origins were of a trader. Now, this has evolved over time to where now Kokopelli doesn't have a hunchback. His back is just hunched over, like he's just, woo, I'm jamming, I'm playing my flute. That's kind of how it's viewed now. But originally, the back was arched, but there was a big old hunchback carrying trade goods. So I think this is an accurate depiction. I think this is accurate to say. Now let's compare him to Xochipilli, which Xochipilli, Kokopelli, very similar in the sound. Now, some people question that as well. That's fine. There's associations here. So who is Xochipilli? Xochipilli, that is the Aztec rendition, but I believe the idea of Xochipilli comes much earlier. And in kind of the end of the Aztec, the Toltec, and some of these groups in Mesoamerica, northern Mexico, there was a lot of tumultuousness. There was, you think of the Mayan people, how dark things got and human sacrifice and stuff. And it seems like at the end of all that, there was a counterculture movement. There was a movement away from the darkness and hey, our leaders have failed us, our gods have failed us. We've had plague and famine and drought, and we had all this human sacrifice to appease the gods. The gods weren't appeased. We didn't get our water back. We didn't have a proliferation of food. Well, forget that. We're going to turn on this and kind of have like a hippie movement almost, kind of like a flower child movement. Now, it's important to note that among the Aztec and kind of the northern Mexico, northwestern Mexico tribes, the idea of death is just a beautiful version of this life. And it's like, okay, the beautiful desert in full bloom where it's not too hot, it's not winter, and all the flowers are in bloom, all the cactuses are blossoming, and there is a profusion of butterflies and hummingbirds, and these things are pollinating. So it's about reproduction and about beauty and beautiful smells and food being plentiful. And that's kind of the afterlife, is the butterfly and flower world, is sort of the positive view that some of these northwestern Mexico, southwestern United States cultures moved to, is that, hey, we're going to have this beauty, this is afterlife, and this is what we want to celebrate. So with that in mind, Xochipilli. Who is Xochipilli? Xochipilli in Aztec culture is a venerated figure of many things. He is the god of beauty, youth, love, passion, sex, sexuality, fertility, arts, songs, music, dance, painting, writing, games, playfulness, nature, vegetation, and flowers. That's a lot of things. Now, is he a god? Again, like I said, Kokopelli may not actually be a god, but might be a revered figure. But, according to the Dene, who I've talked to, they said, no, he is viewed as being a man. But again, this is kind of like saying coyote. Coyote, we don't say coyotes. We're like, this is coyote. This is old man coyote. He's a figure. He's, and so, well, where does he live? Is he dead? Is he from the past? Is he in the present? Is he in the future? He lives in primordial time. Time before time, okay? So that seems like this is how Xochipilli is as well, and Kokopelli, that these are figures that live outside of the realms of time. So you can talk about them in the present. So Xochipilli, the name, contains the Nahuatl words Xochitli, which means flower, and Pili, which either means prince or child or son. Hence, this is the flower child. This is the flower prince. So he's like the original flower child. He is often depicted with big, old, huge macaw feather, bright red primary tail feather, macaw feather, plumes sticking straight up. And he is often depicted under the influence of entheogenic substances, psychedelics, certain drugs. So there's a famous statue of him, and he is in a pose that, now I gotta say too, let me back up a little here. I grew up in the United States, and I grew up in an era where there was a big movement against drugs. We had the DARE program, which was, all our schools teaching us of how harmful and bad drugs are and stuff. And sure, that's good for a cohesive society. But so most people, if you talk about any of these substances in a historical context, people instantly shut down. Well, don't shut down. We're talking about history here. So listen up. We're talking about how people use these things. In America, in the United States, for Europeans and people who have come over after Native Americans were already here, people who came here and were starting a new culture did not have any tradition on uses of these kind of entheogenic substances. So it's just like, nope, these are bad. Most cultures, all these things are good in their place. So in other words, if you need a vision, you go to the shaman, you go to the Didan the Vizgi, you go to the medicine man. My culture, I'm from the Sami people in Scandinavia, and we have a Nawadi, it's our medicine man. You go and you're like, hey, I'm seeking wisdom for life. I need to know what to do. And they'll send you either on a vision quest, or they'll have you undergo a meditation situation where you're taking some of these entheogenic psychedelic substances. They're there with you and guiding you and making sure that it's all done on the up and up and make sure that you're safe. We don't have that anymore. If you have just people hey, I'm just doing some drugs, woo, recreationally, you're missing what these substances are supposed to teach you. There is a wide range on this statue of Xochipilli, a wide range of plants and mushroom species that have all been identified all around the edge that cause certain kinds of mind-altering states. Some of them are not even illegal in the United States, like Salvia divinorum is a flower that's depicted on there, and this is something that does cause psychedelic things and is not, illegal. Then there's some things like peyote mushrooms, which peyote is very interesting, and it's illegal in the United States unless you are affiliated with like a tribe or certain circumstances about there. But again, that's one that you've probably heard of. You've probably heard of peyote. But all of these substances are all around this individual, Xochipilli, this depiction. And if you look at his face, his hands are kind of up. And if you look on his face, if you've researched people who go on one of these psychedelic journeys, they go into a state where they go kind of almost to the afterlife and come back. And when they're in this state, this is how human physiology responds. Kind of hands out, eyes locked, pupils dilated, mouth open, and just breathing like this. It's a state while your mind is doing something and your body just goes to that state. So this is a depiction of Xochipilli that appears to be in a psychedelic trance. And all the images all around the statue are showing all of these entheogenic substances. So this is very much the flower child. Now, you have Kokopelli and you have Xochipilli. Well, in the southwestern tribes, there is a tradition of the sun child or the solar youth. There are tribes that even to this day will, on certain things, try to invite and venerate the solar youth. And it's a figure, they'll typically have some sort of a bundle, and they'll have scarlet macaw tail feathers up top, showing that kind of idea. So even if Xochipilli and Kokopelli are not the same being, even if one didn't come from the other, they overlap in what they represent. There was a desire in the southwest U.S., in the northwest Mexico, to have a figure, a being that represented these things of fertility and love and beauty and flowers and the return of the sun, the return of the rains. And whether we're talking Kokopelli, Xochipilli, the solar youth, you have them, this idea that overlaps with each other. Now, I see, and this is a bit of a stretch, so I admit this is a stretch, but here in northern Utah, we see at many sites, we see caves. And in these caves, a lot of times in the cave or above, right in front of the cave, we often see what looks like a solar youth. We see like a Xochipilli or a Kokopelli type figure with big old huge scarlet macaw plumes sticking out up above. There's one that I've done videos on some of my other channels about, and I don't want to mention the site. Nobody lived in it. It's on top of a big old mountain, and there's no carbon. Nobody lived here. They just went in this cave, and they painted this big, giant image of a figure that's holding like a spear and holding like a shield or something, and has these big old thing of feathers. Now that doesn't have to mean anything. That might not be associated at all. But we know from Xochipilli to Kokopelli to the Solar Youth to all the way up here in northern Utah, we have images of a red plumed figure with big old red plumes sticking up that seems to potentially have a connection. Now, it could be as simple as these ideas are going up north, and maybe you just see on something from a trader, maybe you see the image of something with feathers sticking straight up, and you're like, I like that image. I'm gonna paint a figure that way with big old bright red feathers, and maybe it doesn't have that association. That's fine. I'm just pointing it out because a lot of people are not as used to this. A lot of people haven't climbed to the top of mountains and climbed in caves and seen these big, old, beautiful pictographic paintings. And so I want to make people at least aware of them so they know that these are out there. So again, main differences, it's important to remember with Kokopelli, it's all over the Southwest art today. Not as prominent in the past, but again, this being seems to be not a god, but a venerated figure who, was hauling trade goods and also delivering fertility, delivering babies and delivering a lot of these same things that we see with the Solar Youth of the Southwestern tribes today and of Xochipilli out of Mexico. So let me know what you have heard. I would love to know your thoughts. There's many Native Americans who have been watching these videos and have given some incredible insight. Let me know what you feel I've gotten wrong. I'm just sharing what I've learned and what I've heard and what I've been told and what I've read. I would love to know everybody else's perspective as well. So please feel free to share. And if you haven't already, if you can subscribe to my channel, I very much appreciate it. But please just always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.